Okay, Liz Wheeler Show, episode 424, take one. This is going to be a good one. So independent journalist Karlyn Borysenko infiltrated a socialism conference, which was aptly named the Socialism Conference. I guess it's one of the biggest conferences where socialists gather in the United States. And she went undercover. She doesn't identify as a conservative, but she's on our side. I would say she's on the right versus on the left. She's certainly not a socialist. She can describe to you her exact ideology. We agree on a lot and we disagree on some stuff, but she's a great follow on X. Highly recommend you guys follow her there. But she took a recording device with her undercover at this conference and caught the socialists at this conference admitting exactly what they want for our country, what they want for our families, what they want for our children, and how they are trying to sneak their ideology and indoctrination past us, even in states where, for example, it is not legal any longer to indoctrinate with critical race theory in schools. They have strategies and loopholes that they're exploiting to try to get around this. So I want to show you some of this footage that she captured because it's remarkable. It's also a crazy thing to do, to go to a socialism conference. So guys, follow her at karlyn.substack.com, but she's with me now. Karlyn Borysenko, thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, thanks so much for having me and discussing what is a little bit of a crazy topic, if we're honest about it.
This is a crazy topic. So before we even get into the clips, I want you to tell me how you came up with this idea and how you pulled it off. Because I would say, just to be a little stereotypical, that if you line up a bunch of people on the right, maybe conservatives, and then you line up a bunch of socialists, they look a little different, they act a little different, they talk a little different. So how did you pull off going to this conference without them discovering that you were a plant?
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked because it was actually quite an endeavor. About a year ago, I started on my YouTube channel just as a gag, this thing called Socialism Saturday, where every Saturday on my channel, we sit down and we watch real socialist content and we talk about it and we have drinks and we make fun of them. And it actually started because I realized this socialism conference was streaming their keynotes onto YouTube Live last year. And it was like, haha, guys, let's make fun of the socialists. And then we all kind of became so obsessed with it that it became a weekly endeavor. And we started learning who these real socialist activists were, and we started learning how to speak socialist, because even though it sounds like they speak English, they don't really speak English. They speak in code so that only they can understand. And after a year of watching these people once or twice a week online, I said, you know what? I want to go into the belly of the beast. I want to go to the socialism conference. I'm ready. I know how to speak socialist. I know how to dress like them. I know how to act like them. And so I decided to sign up and go. And actually, it's funny how I got away with it, because the socialists were well aware that I was streaming their content, and they didn't like it at all. Like, I was one of their public enemies. And so I signed up under a fake name several months ago. And then when it started getting closer to the conference, I said, what would happen if I signed up under my real name? Would they let me come? Would they let me listen to their content? Because I'm not disruptive or anything. I just wanted to listen. And so I signed up under my real name, but also had the fake name registration. And then 2 days after they closed online registration, they emailed me and they preemptively banned me from the conference for a code of conduct violation before I even left New Hampshire to go. And I was like, okay, well, I still have the fake name registration, so I'm still going. On my way to Chicago, I was literally sitting in the airport in Boston. I got an email from my hotel. They canceled my hotel reservation while I was on the way there. So it was like this mad dash where I had to find another hotel that was near the conference, but I did, and I was in a disguise. I had to dye my hair. I got these SJW glasses, but the key of it was, Liz, is that this conference has a mask mandate, and so I kind of had like a built-in disguise where I just dressed very non-binary, and I got past all of them.
That is so first of all, the glasses, it's the same glasses you're wearing right now, right? You got those as part of your disguise?
I actually did.
They totally fit you. I actually like them.
I actually really like them too. And I'd been planning on getting these glasses for a long time. And actually, so I got them a couple weeks before the conference. And I said, I'm just not going to wear them publicly before I go so that no one will have seen them.
So what did you do to disguise your appearance? Because if you've been streaming on YouTube and the socialists knew who you were public enemy number one, they would recognize your voice. I mean, you have a distinctive voice, I think. And they also know what your face looks like from all these up-close videos. So what did you do to disguise yourself?
Well, so I did have to wear a mask the whole time, like, and then so I was wearing that mask everywhere. I did not take that mask off until I got back to the hotel room, actually, and so I was like one of those people walking down the street wearing a mask. But the glasses actually really do change my appearance. My hair was a different color. I styled it in a different way. I was wearing a mask. I wore really baggy clothes, so I really tried to make myself look like much bigger than I actually am in real life because a lot of socialists are a lot bigger. It's just the way it goes. And so I just kind of like kept to myself. I didn't really talk to anyone. I kind of just like, I came in, I sat in their sessions. I had a little tiny recording device in my pocket that's that big, and I just sat there and I listened to them.
Interesting. And were they friendly? Like, did they notice that you were someone that didn't usually come to their conference? Did they try to engage with you?
Oh. Oh, they did try to engage with me. Oh, they're very friendly. They're very nice to people who they think are other socialists, like for sure. I mean, it is actually like, like the whole like body positivity thing and just like accepting everyone, that applies to people who they think are on their side. And so they're not going to like ostracize anyone for any reason as long as they think that you have the same politics as they do.
All right, guys, I want to talk to you about Delta Rescue. This is a question that I think has a very obvious answer. I'm pretty sure we're all going to answer this question the same way. Do you want to save dogs and cats from starving to death in the wilderness? I mean, I actually hope that there's not even a single person on this show that would answer that question no. I think the obvious answer is yes, which is why you have to check out Delta Rescue. Delta Rescue is an organization on a lifelong mission to care for animals saved from the wild, not just dogs, but cats and horses too. They are the largest care for life animal sanctuary in the world, which means they're not an ordinary shelter. You could call them a super sanctuary for rescued animals to be able to play and love and eat and heal and be happy. This is a care for life, remember, so no kill. Here's how you can help though. Delta Rescue relies solely on the contributions from people like us to care for their 1,500 animals. No contribution is too small. Every dollar helps and goes directly to their animals. They also send out monthly newsletters that include heartwarming stories. I love them. I know you will too. I encourage you to take some time. Visit deltarescue.org. They can answer all of your questions. They're happy to speak with other Good Samaritans. You won't regret it. Go to deltarescue.org. That's deltarescue.org. Interesting. Okay, so we showed one of these clips on the show last week. You released them kind of a couple a day last week for a few days in a row. We showed the one of Emily Drabinski. She's the president of the American Library Association, talking about using public schools and public libraries as sites of socialist organizing. It's like shocking to hear them say this, but at the same time, we shouldn't be surprised because this is what they want to do. We're not going to show that clip again. You guys can go back and watch the show last week because I want to get to the clip. It's called Fugitive Pedagogy. And before we play this, to give context to people so that we know what we're watching and what we're listening to, because the recording device, guys, remember, this was in her pocket. So you do have to listen closely to hear what these voices are saying. Totally worth listening to closely. But Karlyn, can you tell us what we're going to be watching in this video?
Yeah, I believe we're going to be watching a clip from Jesse Hagopian. There are actually several clips about fugitive pedagogy. So fugitive pedagogy was one of the main
we have
themes.
them both.
Oh, cool. So yeah, fugitive pedagogy was one of the main themes I heard over and over and over again at the conference. And it's basically this idea that in states where they have banned the topic of critical race theory, systemic racism, unconscious bias, of all that from public schools, what the socialists are doing is they're zooming in teachers from out of state into these classrooms, like in Florida explicitly, to teach these banned topics.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so they're teaching each other how to do this because this is obviously a loophole. They think they won't get caught. So let's take a look at this this first clip.
All right. Thank you, everybody. I'm Jesse Hagopian. I'm a teacher in Seattle, and I work with Black Lives Matter at school and the Zen Education Project and Rethinking Schools. So I've actually got to zoom in and do meetings with classrooms in Florida and with some bold teachers who invited us into the classroom in the tradition of fugitive pedagogy, and smuggling in contraband curriculum, showing the film, The Rebellious Life of Mrs. Rosa Parks, and then having us come and discuss systemic racism in a state where it's illegal. And so that rebellion is inspiring to me, and telling teachers in my state to do this work if they can do it in those conditions, right? So I thank you all for the work you are doing, the fight that you're putting up. That's really a fight for all of us, because we know what they are incubating in Florida is about exporting it all across the country, and we're already seeing that, right? When Florida banned the AP African American Studies curriculum, the response wasn't a rebellion for ethnic studies all across the country. The response from the College Board was, okay, cool, we'll cut everything that you wanted out of it. So the word systemic does not exist in AP African American curriculum anymore. That is not an advanced course. If you can't talk about systemic racism, you're just lying about this country, right? They are now exporting the don't say gay, don't say trans laws across the country now that Florida is not the only state now, right? So they are incubating this fascism and working on ways to export it. I think that one of the ways we need to understand what's happening right now to understand how to defeat it is to look at the McCarthy era, because the Red Scare and the Lavender Scare are the playbook I think that they're drawing from very consciously. Label anything that you don't like communism and then fire the people, right? So thousands of teachers lost their jobs across the country as a result of the Red Scare. And the Lavender Scare, actually more people were fired from the federal government for being labeled, quote, homosexual than even red, right? Even a communist. And specifically in Florida, the Johns Committee was set up to interrogate teachers, to bring them from their classrooms to sit before a committee in the 40s and 50s and have to defend their sexuality. And if you were just a single woman teacher, you were under suspicion of being lesbian and were often fired, right? And that, they're very consciously reviving that with these laws. And I think when we can see that history and teach that history to young people, to our social movements, it helps us understand the tradition they stand in and the one that we stand in, because what ended the McCarthy era and the Red Scare and the Lavender Scare was the eruption of the civil rights movement, the Black Power movement, the gay liberation, right? LGBTQ people fighting for their liberation, and that's really what I think it's going to take today. And I'll just end by saying that the new law goes into place that says that if you have the wrong book in your classroom about race or sexuality, you can face a felony in Florida, right? That you 5 years in jail.
Including being labeled a child sexual offender.
Right, exactly. And so my question, just to end, is what do we do when the first, do you think they're actually about putting teachers in jail? Is that the next step? And if that happens, what's our, like, I want to get on the next plane, the first teacher who faces a felony for having a wrong book, I want to get down there and be in front of that school. How do we mobilize our networks to get people down there to fight back?
Okay, so fascinating, right? Totally fascinating. All right, guys, let's talk about MyBookie. Do you want to have a casino adventure from your own couch? Sounds pretty good to me. You don't have to hop on a plane or anything. Well, check out MyBookie Casino for just that experience. Whether you're into betting on sports, which I know a lot of you guys are, live betting, casino, live casino, or racing, it's all right there on your phone or on your laptop. And for a chance at real cash rewards, check out weekly blackjack tournaments and all kinds of high-end games. There's a lot of other options too, like slots, progressive jackpots, and live dealer action. They've literally got it all. And the best part is you can secure yourself a sweet deposit bonus if you use my promo code, which is Wheeler, W-H-E-E-L-E-R. That's promo code Wheeler, W-H-E-E-L-E-R. And that's not all, because their revamped loyalty program ensures that you will be showered with rewards, including free spins, cashback offers, and a host of exclusive VIP perks. The more you play, the more you win. So play anytime, anywhere with the MyBookie Casino, and be sure to use my promo code Wheeler. First of all, who is this guy? Is he a staple in the socialist movement? What does he do?
Yeah.
What does he organize? Give us a little background on this individual first before we even get to the content of what he's talking about.
Yeah, Jesse Hagopian is a staple in the socialist movement. I was actually just looking at, so this conference was put on by Haymarket Books, which is one of the key socialist book publishers. Socialists have dozens and dozens of book publishers that do nothing but churn out socialist books. Haymarket Books actually took over from the International Socialist Organization, one of the main socialist organizers in the country. They had a little scandal a couple years ago, and now they've changed their name into Haymarket Books. But Jesse Hagopian presents for them all the time. He is a high school teacher in Seattle. He works for Black Lives Matter in school. So anytime you see Black Lives Matter curriculum showing up in school, which it's still in schools all over the country, that's coming from these people. He worked with the Zen Education Project too, which is overtly pushing socialist curriculum in schools, and he is just all over the place. He's also involved in something called the Tempest Collective, which is a radical revolutionary socialist group that is a national collective that are actively pushing for revolution. And when we say revolution, what we mean is the overthrow of capitalism. That is always the goal of these people. And so Jesse Hagopian has actually been on the record in different clips that I posted in saying that the purpose of pushing Black Lives Matter curriculum and anti-racist curriculum into schools is explicitly to create a socialist world, because they are hyper aware that the schools are basically the largest audience that they will ever have, the largest captive audience that they will ever have. And so that is something that they're hyper focused on right now.
Well, that was one of the interesting things I think that he said. He said the way, and this is his version of revisionist history, of course, I'm just quoting him, but he said that the way that the Red Scare ended was the Black liberation movement, the Black Power movement, and he said that's going to have to happen again. Well, the Black Power movement, the Black liberation movement, these were violent movements. These were revolutionary movements. So it sounds to me like he's calling for that again.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm going to tell you guys too, like, critical race theory hasn't really been talked about in the past year and a half or so, because people have been mostly focused on gender ideology. Critical race theory is about to make a comeback, because what's happened in the far left communities is that the Black far left communities are actually really annoyed that the trans people are getting all the attention. And so they're riling up around critical race theory. And so that's about to start making a major comeback again. We're going to see that. But no, I mean, they are hyper aware that this is, when you look at the LGBTQ movement now, what has actually happened is there is a branch of socialism called queer Marxism. And I could go on and on about queer Marxism for days, but queer Marxists have basically hijacked legitimate, groups that were actually doing kind of normal things. We might not agree about gay marriage and that sort of thing, but that was a legitimate problem for a lot of gay people, right? Once they got the right to get married, what happened is these Marxist group came in and hijacked that particular movement and used it to push Marxism into the schools and through things like gender sexuality alliances, that sort of thing. So they are actually very hyper focused on pushing that ideology to kids in these ways. They have a program called Rethinking Schools, where they actually will create materials for teachers to use in the classroom. I actually have a Rethinking Schools teacher planning textbook that I got for $8 on the internet that lays out all the social justice things they want teachers to teach. They create entire curriculum for them. And I'd say this because a lot of people are focusing on the books in classrooms. The teachers don't need books. They're creating their own curriculum. They're downloading stuff off the internet. They're zooming in other people. And so they're finding ways around all of the book stuff, all of the laws. And they're not going to stop until they get what they want.
So this fugitive pedagogy thing, when he's talking about it's fugitive or smuggler pedagogy, I think they're two terms for the same thing. So the teacher, if we're talking about Florida, for example, where it's not permitted to talk about trans ideology or critical race theory in the classroom, the teacher themselves are not allowed to speak about that. So is there a loophole in the law that allows a teacher that's been zoomed in a different state to do that? Or is there just no enforcement mechanism because that teacher out of state is outside the reach of Florida law enforcement?
There's no enforcement mechanism for it, because I mean they can't go arrest Jesse Hagopian in Seattle for zooming into a classroom, right? And I would actually argue that these laws have always been a little bit misguided, because the fact of the matter is that school boards don't actually enforce curriculum in the vast majority of states. It's only in Vermont and Connecticut that school boards actually have oversight over curriculum. And so once the classroom door closes, teachers can teach whatever they want. And so I strongly recommend people, go on the social media of your kids' teachers, look at their Instagram, look at their Facebook, look at their Twitter, because if they're teaching things they shouldn't be, chances are they're going to be posting it online, and you want to make sure you know that.
So I don't know, this is confusing to me in a way, because would the teacher in Florida, this hypothetical teacher that zoomed in, a radical teacher, would they not be culpable? Would they not be able to be held accountable under Florida law because they were the ones that presented the Zoom call, even if they weren't the teacher that spoke the words on the Zoom call? Or is there literally no way that this can be enforced?
I think that that's a really good question, and that's a really good question for Ron DeSantis. And I would actually like to see his answer to that, because I don't think that this is something that anyone has actually planned for, that they were going to Zoom in people from out of state. But again, how are they going to monitor that? How are they going to enforce it? I strongly pushed for the idea of cameras in classrooms a couple of years ago. Not that I'm necessarily interested in increasing the surveillance state. I think that's bad. But the fact of the matter is, if you don't have eyes in those classrooms, how are you even going to know what's going on?
Yeah, or what some nonprofits do, especially in the political world, maybe this applies in a sense, a little bit in a parallel sense. What nonprofits do if they're not allowed to talk about political candidates is they say, well, official staff members don't talk about political candidates, but if we hire a speaker that comes on stage and they talk about a political candidate, well, we didn't know that in advance. It's not in our control what they say. Maybe it's that sort of plausible deniability. Okay, I want to go on to the next clip because we do have a few of these that are all, I would say, equally as shocking. This one, we know this, but to hear it being spoken out of the mouth of a socialist, I think just helps orient us to how to fight back to this. This is a clip, if you could explain the context, where they're talking about how education, meaning the public school system, should be the primary tool used to transform a country into a socialist nation.
Yeah, so this was in a session against confronting the backlash against anti-racist education, and it just shows that they are hyper aware that education is the key to the kingdom. They are going, it's a trope, right, to say they're going after your kids, but they're going after your kids. They know that this is the key to building their socialist world, and so and they are hyper aware that the right is really focused on books, and so I want to emphasize for people, I understand why people have been focused on books. I understand there's pornographic material in books, but what you need to understand is that because the socialists know that the conservative right are focused on books, they're going over here. So they're going to the other side. They're going into policy, they're going into curriculum, they're getting into positions of power within the administration. And I think that this clip is really illustrative of that philosophy.
All right, I want to introduce you guys to the Wellness Company. Doctors who actually follow science, like Dr. Peter McCullough, you know him, we've had him on the show before, started the Wellness Company to build a parallel healthcare system, one free from big pharma and big medicine corruption. Because the fact of the matter is, you and we must take control of our own health, especially in a post-pandemic world, which is why we've got to talk about this spike support formula from the Wellness Company. It's a revolutionary supplement. You can find it on their website. Highly recommend you look it up. Thousands of people have reported better mental clarity, reduced inflammation, and increased energy levels. The founding of this company is actually quite interesting. It's because of our failing medical system, because of big pharma, and because of a lack of appreciation for natural approaches to cure illness. The Wellness Company's vision champions the right to make one's own choices for their body. And no, we're not talking about abortion. The Wellness Company strives to build a new healthcare system that actually earns people's trust, governed and operated with transparency, offering the highest quality practitioners who align at their core with the fundamental belief that patients should be put first. The medical teams at this company fight for medical freedom and truth and are devoted to helping the public. So I highly recommend you visit their website. Go to twc.health/Liz. It's TWC stands for the Wellness Company. twc.health/Liz. Use my promo code Liz to save 15% at checkout. That's twc.health/Liz, promo code Liz. Okay, let's play this clip because this is them. This is the words from their mouths.
Wrap up by talking about why I think this struggle for anti-racist education right now, it should be a central fight for the left, for the socialist movement in this country, for everyone, and struggle for social justice. I think too often the left organizations have seen education as just one among many arenas of struggle instead of seeing it as a centrally, strategically important struggle that has the potential to bring together tens of millions of people. When you think of everyone as a public school student and all the parents and all the educators who are unionized, this is like a key battle. This should have always been a major focus of those of us who want to transform the world and see a socialist society, as a site that can bring together millions of multiracial people together in a common struggle. But now that the far right has made it their number one way to in the struggle. Like, I think we really have to see the urgency of focusing our movement around the struggle for anti-racist education. And I'll just end by saying that we're seeing that potential in some incredible fight back that's happened. But the reality is there's an incredible fight back happening, whether it's just classroom teachers who are refusing to lie to students even though the law says they have to, and they're doing what Jarvis Gibbons calls fugitive pedagogy.
So this, Karlyn, I think is really important, not because parents aren't aware, not because citizens aren't aware that education is being used as indoctrination, but because I think a lot of people on the right feel that we have emerged victorious against critical race theory in the classroom because parents have taken over school boards, because states have passed laws banning this in the classroom. We feel, oh, this is an area of the culture war that we won. We actually did it. We eradicated this. And this kind of says, oh, wait a second. They're not giving up. They're actually just doubling down.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right about that, Liz. And you know, this is the thing. Again, school boards do not actually dictate curriculum in the vast majority of states. And I don't think a lot of people realize that. But this is also, socialists are not going to stop something just because a law tells them not to do it, right? That's their whole thing. They like the struggle. They like going up against diversity. And I think, again, they're hyper aware that this is their key battleground. The battleground that everyone needs to be paying attention to are the schools, and especially in regards to parental rights, about what's going on in those schools. But this is, you know, what I loved about this clip is it was so explicit that we are doing anti-racist education because we know it's our key to building a socialist world. That's why they're doing it. Another thing they talked about in a different clip that I haven't posted yet is all about this idea of teaching truthful history, which is what they say they're doing when they're teaching critical race theory. And essentially what they mean when they say we're teaching the true history or accurate history is they're teaching a far left interpretation of history that's always coming through this bias of collective struggle, which is how they frame it. And so I just, you know, anytime you see Black Lives Matter curriculum showing up in schools, anytime you see social justice curriculum or anti-racist education or any of that, people need to be aware that it all leads back to this far left political ideology. And this is Marxism, this is communism. And they're going to the schools because if they can get your kids early enough, they know that it's dang near impossible to change their minds later.
It is, it's heartbreaking. So some of the language you said you said they speak a different language. They're technically speaking English, but they have their code words that they use. What are some of these code words that people should be on the lookout for?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked this question. Okay, so people need to understand that the four goals of the far left are always and forever the same. Gain as much power as possible, destabilize the system, attack capitalism, usher in their Marxist utopia. So I want to go through those four real quick because it will explain the language game they're playing. The first thing they do is gain power. So they get themselves into institutional power positions through getting jobs as teachers, administrators, principals, superintendents, politicians, what have you, so that they can control the system. They use the power that they gain in order to destabilize the system. That means they cause problems. They cause problems that cause people pain in society, whether that be fiery but mostly peaceful protests or critical race theory in the classroom or whatever it is. Their fundamental goal is always and forever to create chaos, to destabilize everything that we have built American society on. Once they cause problems and destabilize things and people are feeling pain based on those problems, they say capitalism is to blame for all of this. That is your big problem. Capitalism has caused all of the racist problems in this country. It's caused all the gender problems in this country. It's caused all of the inflation, all the inequality. So capitalism is the boogeyman. And then once they convince people that capitalism is the boogeyman, they say, how about Marxism? How about we try something new? And so that's what they're doing with every single tactic that they implement. So in terms of the language game that they're playing, anytime you hear the word whiteness, white supremacy, anti-racism, they are not talking about the color of your skin. They're talking about capitalism because they believe that capitalism is the underlying problem to what they call systemic racism in this country. Capitalism built systemic racism. Capitalism created slavery. And so they believe that people who are white are the bourgeois. They are the landowners, the private property owners. They are the CEOs. The number one goal of socialists is to abolish private property. And that means your house. They don't want you to own your house. They don't want you to have a kitchen. When Joe Biden Biden wanted to get rid of our stoves. That's actually a real socialist thing, that they're trying to get rid of private kitchens. They don't want you to have a car. They don't want you to have a business. And spoiler alert, your children are considered private property too. And they don't want that to exist either. So that's a different thing we should pick up on in a second. But whiteness always means capitalism. This is why we see headlines in the Washington Post about multiracial whiteness. This is why the Los Angeles Times called Larry Elder the black face of white supremacy. It's not about skin color at all. So that's a trick that they play very, very often that people need to be aware of.
Which I think we've all heard that. I mean, we laugh. The Larry Elder example is probably the most apropos example. We're like, how can a black man be a white supremacist? Or remember that those 5 cops, I think it was in Tennessee, either early this year or late last year, and they essentially beat to death a black man. They were 5 black cops, and yet they were told that this was a white supremacist violence. And we were like, wait a second, the police chief is black, these 5 cops are black. This was obviously an egregious crime, beating this guy, but what did race have to do with it? And the left were not deterred. They were like, no, this is an institution of white supremacy because the police is supposed to protect private property, from your person to the things that you own. So keep an ear out, guys, for these terms. Okay, I want to go to the aspect of this. This was really shocking. I think this was the most disturbing thing that was recorded. Just a heads up to you guys listening. If you have kids in the room, you might not want to play this in front of them. But this was, and Karlyn, you can give more context in this, but this is when they were talking about children as quote unquote sex workers. I don't even like that phrase because it's just a rebrand or a euphemism for prostitution and pornography. Potato, I suppose. But they weren't just talking about this for adults where it's bad enough, but for children. Can you explain the context of this video before we play it?
Yeah, absolutely. So this was in a session called The Politics of Childhood. And so how I just explained that they do not consider children to be the private property of their parents. They believe, socialists are a little bit like Scientologists in this respect, where they believe that children are but little adults in little bodies that can make all their own decisions. This is why they have no problem with kids having gender reassignment surgery or anything like that. And so this was a session talking about the politics of how do we liberate children from their parents, because they believe that when children are private property of their parents, they are quite literally equating it to slavery. And so that's the context of what we're about to hear.
Which is absolutely bananas. Okay, let's play this clip if we could. It's called Children as Sex Workers.
First of all, thank you both. I really appreciate your work. My name is Chanel, and I'm a sex work activist working at the intersection of migrant justice, capitalism, and sex work. And we've been dealing with the child sex panic, the child sex trafficking conspiracy theories since the late 90s. And I had never until this panel been like, what about young people in the sex industry as part of a children's liberation vision? Like, there's just like a utopia I had never really thought of before, because the world feels so separated, and the issue of youth and sex work is so incredibly loaded. Like, I was just like, I don't even know if I'd ask this question if it's being live streamed. Like, it is just so, like, you are rolling into a lot of trouble when you start talking about the rights of young people in the sex industry. But young people in the sex industry deserve and need rights. At minimum, actually, liberation and justice. And thank you. So, I just was like, I want to hear folks who are thinking about the liberation of children and about movements for the liberation of children and how you understand, to what extent you're thinking through, because when that includes, highly marginalized kids on the street, that for sure includes people selling sex, right? That includes people selling sex to survive in foster care systems and on the streets. And yeah, how are you thinking about that? Are you thinking about that? Is that, are we just walking through too much trouble to even try to address that when talking about the rights of children? So I want to put that up there, and thank you both.
It's so disturbing. The casual way that she asks this question and these phrases. Like I said, I know that the video, remember, she had this recording device in her pocket, so she's undercover. That's why it's a little bit fuzzy. But we could pretty clearly hear what she's saying. I mean, this sex work activist is talking about the quote rights of young people in the sex industry. She uses the term children's liberation vision. I mean, Karlyn, this is a deranged individual.
I have to tell you, I heard a lot of shocking things at the Socialism conference, and I heard this at about 10:30 in the morning when I hadn't even had my coffee yet, and I was literally sitting right next to the woman when she said it, and it was probably one of the hardest things of the entire conference that I could not react. I couldn't roll my eyes, I couldn't look shocked, I just looked down at the floor, I was like, no, this is not good. But what she's talking about is that, I mean, and she says it in the clip, you know, some children just need to be sex workers because they find themselves in desperate situations, so how do we protect the rights of those children to be sex workers? And there was no pushback. And I kind of, you know, I
Oh.
don't want to it was just, it was mind blowing to me. And I kind of sort of understand what she's saying, in that what she's arguing is that children should not be arrested for being sex workers, which I actually I do agree with. If children get put in that position, they shouldn't be arrested. But what was shocking to me is that there was no talk of, well, why are they sex workers in the first place? How do we get them out immediately of being sex workers? How do we protect them? It was literally just like, oh yeah, sure, children should be like, no, children should not be sex workers. Like, there was nothing to that effect. And the answer that she got back, and the answer was actually from a professor at Johns Hopkins University. It's this woman named Jules Gill Peterson, who is also deeply embedded in socialism movements. I've actually got her on tape advising college students to self-administer cross-sex hormones, which is a whole other can of worms. But I mean, the answer back was, if you want to protect the rights of children to be sex workers, then just get some people together to help you and form a movement. And it's like, no, like this is the line that you should not cross. But in their world, again, children are but little adults that can make all their own decisions. And I want people to be aware too, these attacks that you see on parental rights, be it that school boards or districts across the country have these policies where they are not informing parents when their children use different name, different gender in the classroom. Many different school districts have been sued for doing this by parents who have their kids socially transitioned by the schools because they didn't tell the parents what was going on. That all directly relates back to the people that we just heard, because the attacks on parental rights are coming from these people. If you see op-eds in the Washington Post, the New York Times, the Spectator, the Atlantic, all attacking parental rights for parents, they are always written by socialists. I mean, and you can tell based on the language that they're using. Sometimes they even admit that they're socialists. And so, you know, it might seem like an abstract clip that people don't think has a lot of relevance to their lives. But if your child goes to a school in which the school policy says that they do not have to inform you if your kids are using different names and pronouns, that is directly a result of what these people are doing. Parental rights have to be the battle that we do not give an inch on, because if they can get at parental rights, then they are going to literally use it to try to abolish the biological nuclear family, which there were sessions about at this conference.
Right. Well, I actually think that this clip might hit home with a lot of parents who watch the show, maybe even more than the other ones, because it invokes this feeling of panic when you think of these radical leftists who want to impose evil on your child. And right now, we, at least as parents, feel that we have a bulwark because we get to make the decisions about our children. If we don't want to send them to a public school, we can put them in a private school, we can homeschool them. We decide what they watch on TV. We decide what they consume on their smartphones. We decide who their friends are. We decide what church they attend. There's somewhat of a security, as there should be, in being a parent, knowing that you have dominion over your children when they're minors. But the idea that leftists are, I mean, this is the phrase that got me. I have a 2.5-year-old daughter, so I guess as a parent, I'm speaking personally. The phrase that got me is children's liberation. Children's liberation, I mean, not only is that a communist term to use the word liberation in that sense, but they're actively, like, what do they want? Do they want parents to still have children under our roofs and our homes and just have no decision-making power? Or do they want to actively take children away? Like, what's their vision?
Oh, Liz, you're jumping down the abolish the family rabbit hole. And abolish the family is probably the most dystopian things that socialists want. It's literally written into the Communist Manifesto that they want to abolish the biological nuclear family because they consider the nuclear family to be the thing standing between them and abolishing capitalism. And so what socialists want is they don't want you to have parental rights at all. They want children to be under the collective care of the state. There were actually conversations at this conference where they were talking about the fact that everyone should be a parent to children. It's like it's like when Hillary Clinton says it takes a village to raise children. Well, they quite literally mean that. And there are some socialists, I mean, there are books called Full Surrogacy Now, Abolish the Biological Family, that actually get directly to this issue, where I think that there are socialists that do want to see a world in which children are born via surrogacy, Tennessee and distributed to families, kind of like in The Giver or Brave New World or Logan's Run or any of those dystopian movies that we've seen. Those are actually real. I cover them on my channel all the time. And in fact, I'm going to have a series of clips coming out this week on my Substack from the Socialism conference that actively shows a pro-abortion woman who is also involved in trans rights for kids and all sorts of other crazy stuff, talking about this explicitly, about how their stated goal is to get rid of the biological family and to create these environments where everyone is a parent to children. What could possibly go wrong?
Oh, I mean, I'm literally speechless. I mean, oftentimes when we talk about what the repercussions or the implications of the assault on parental rights, people accuse us on the other side, whether this is media figures, whether this is elected officials, whether this is leftist activists, accuse us of being hyperbolic. Like, no one wants to take away your kids. We just want to make sure that they are active members of our democracy, et cetera, misusing the word democracy again. But we can see what they want. They actually want to take away our kids, and then they want our children to be allowed to be engaged in sex work, which is another way of saying they want your child to be abused by pedophiles. It will actually blow your mind. So the last clip that I want to show here, if you could give context to this is a professor from the University of Arizona talking about what she does through the DEI, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Office at that university. Who is this first? What's her background?
Her name is Kristen Godfrey. She is the LGBTQIA director at the University of Arizona. She's responsible for creating all sorts of content specifically geared towards students at the University of Arizona. And she's also part of the Tempest Collective, which is the same collective as Jesse Hagopian, which is the Radical Revolutionary Socialist Collective. She also was involved with Maoists at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, before she went to the University of Arizona. So she is a hardcore revolutionary leftist. And this is her. She was getting up in the Q&A discussion in one of the panels that I went to, basically asking for advice on how to get her university to protect her rights to be anti-Semitic, which was a little weird, but that's what the context is.
Okay, well, let's listen to it. If we can tolerate it, let's listen to what she's saying, because this is happening on college campuses.
Next comrade, followed by the comrade with the black mask, followed by the comrade who's helping with ticket check.
Hi, comrades. Great talk. See y'all. Kristen, live in Tucson, in Tempest Collective. I wanted to share a personal experience I'm experiencing at the University of Arizona, and then I just have a couple questions around, I guess a similar question as the comrade in Miami, how to protect teachers, and just thinking through what protection looks like in teacher strikes. But me and my coworker, I don't think they're here. We teach a Marxist-based queer liberation class for queer and trans students at the UA. One of the students who took it is in the room. Hi, Annie. Annie's always yelling at somebody on campus, so I think the class but yeah, so we have this beautiful class. I'm also the director of the LGBTQ Center at the University of Arizona, so it's attached to the center. And because we're teaching this class, Students for Justice in Palestine students have been using the LGBTQ Center to hold meetings, to stash their stuff there. Israeli students found out, and there was a lot of violence in the space going up to Palestinian students saying they don't want them there. And so because of this class that we're teaching, Hillel reached out to my boss and said that I was anti-Semitic. And so the LGBTQ Center is housed in the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. But even with that, we have limited, no one's protecting me in the Diversity and Inclusion Office, right?
Okay, so that one's a little bit fuzzy, Karlyn, but correct me if I'm misinterpreting this. She is asking how she can utilize the DEI office to protect her anti-Semitism that she's teaching to other students on campus. Is that correct?
Yeah, a little bit. So there's so much to break down in this clip. So first of all, I mean, I think the fact that I think she's illustrative of the fact that these people try to get themselves into positions of institutional power that kind of fly under the radar, so that people don't really know what they're doing every day unless they actually are checking in with them. And what she's done is she's gotten herself into the position of working in the Diversity and Equity Office at the University of Arizona, taxpayer funded land grant university, to teach students a Marxist-based course in queer and trans liberation. Anytime you hear the term liberation, you're talking to a socialist, or the term abolition, almost always you're talking to a socialist. And so she's actively targeting queer and trans students on campus, or people who believe they're queer and trans, to deliver this content through the university system. I also found out that she wasn't just using the diversity office to do it. She was also working within the School of Health. So the school that's training doctors and nurses and psychiatrists and pharmacists out of the University of Arizona are getting this content as well. So that's going to make everyone feel great. But bigger picture is that, so socialists do not like Israel. They do not like Israel at all. I mean, I know we're all shocked based on what we've seen out of Ilhan Omar in Congress, but that is pretty indicative of what you see at the Socialism conference. So what she's talking about is that Palestinian students on campus were storing their stuff in her office, and this allegedly, I don't know how truthful this is, made the Israeli students mad. And she said there was violence, which probably just mean that the Israeli students asked a question that she didn't like. And she took the side of the Palestinian students. And then she was mad that the diversity office didn't have her back. And I just think it's a little bit, it's very socialist to go to a conference probably paid for by your employer. She took a student from the University of Arizona to the conference with her, which is a little bit suspect in my book. And then to complain about your employer on the microphone at the conference not protecting your right to be anti-Semitic, it was the most socialist thing of the entire conference.
Well, it is. It is. And well, fortunately, you caught it on camera. So hopefully her employer is aware of this. But it also shows us, I mean, there's a DEI office, not only on every college campus, but in a growing number of them in high schools, on every big corporation has a DEI office. I mean, this is in the federal government. This is in state governments. This is what happens at the DEI office. This is a good place for people to begin if they want to conduct oversight and actually expose what's happening. So you've mentioned a couple of things as the next stage of the socialists' plan. I mean, you talk about critical race theory. It's going to make a resurgence. This assault on parental rights is going to become more extreme. What else can people expect? What should we watch for? I feel oftentimes like the conservative movement, I won't even mention the Republican Party because I think they do nothing to fight against this, but the conservative movement is often playing catch up. We often don't anticipate what these attacks are going to be until these people have already been embedded in our institutions. They're infiltrated. Their curriculum is set. They're already at work, trying to change our children into revolutionaries. It would be nice for a change if we could identify what their battle plan is before they've actually taken action. You're in the midst of this all the time. What are they going to do next?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question. I want to go back to something you just said, though, that people need to look into the equity office in their public schools. So almost every public school district in the country has an equity office, and the teacher professional development training is almost always conducted through the equity office. So just go on your public school district website, search for equity. You're going to find so much stuff that they're doing. You're not even going to know where to start. This is something I actually teach parents to learn how to do, to use publicly available documentation to suss out where the left is infiltrating their school district. So that should be task number one, especially if you have kids in school. But I would say the biggest tip I could give to people is that, and for lack of a better term, you need to learn how to speak socialist. Because again, these people are speaking in a coded language where you don't know what they're saying unless you know how to speak their language. And this is something I do on my YouTube channel every Saturday when we sit down and watch socialism content. It's kind of like an immersive experience where, if you go to France, you're going to learn how to speak French eventually. If you watch enough socialist content, you're going to learn how to speak socialist. And it's shocking once you know how to speak socialist when you see it show up in the real world. So it's something that, a member of my community just last week said, Karlyn, we had this crazy diversity trainer come into the workplace and she started using terms like liberation and abolition and struggle. And I knew she was a socialist because I watched her content. And so I think that people really do need to make a concerted effort to learn how to speak their language, because language is the common thing that helps us to identify them very, very, very quickly. Like you said, I think you need to really hold your public schools to the fire. Best case scenario is honestly get your kids out of public school if you can, because it's going to be very difficult to save the public schools with how much they've taken it over. But if you can't get your kids out of public school, you need to be there for every school board meeting. You need to have all the documentation. You need to go on their websites and find what they're doing. It is all publicly available information. You are entitled to that information. If you have questions about how to do FOIA requests, I have a class on my website that's available for free. It's at activelyunwoke.com. You can find that and it'll teach you how to do FOIA requests. And really just, you have to get involved. That's the biggest thing, because they're not going to relent on education. And I think that if I were to give some advice to the conservative movement, you've got to stop focusing so much on books, because they know you're focusing on books. And so they're going into the back door where you're not looking. So I understand why the focus has been on books. I really do. But it's time to move to a different strategy where you're looking at curriculum and policy documents above the books.
Well, I think this is really insightful because the language part is so important. To use the example that you gave us earlier, when you say socialists use the term whiteness or white supremacy, they're actually talking about capitalism. They're not talking about race. But if we don't recognize that the term that they're saying isn't what they're actually saying, then we're going to have the wrong argument with them. We're actually going to start talking about racial issues instead of talking about the economic revolution that they're trying to impose on our country. So that, I think that's actually a very, very insightful key for a lot of us who are both professionally activists in the conservative movement, but also people who have become activists because their kids are being impacted by this, their parents and concerned citizens who don't want our country to be taken over. That's great advice. Karlyn, you have a YouTube channel, you have a Substack, you have an X account. Tell everyone where they can find you, because I know my viewers are going to be obsessed with you. They're going to want to follow you immediately.
Well, I hope they do. I mean, you can find me on my YouTube channel. It's just Karlyn Borysenko. Pop my name in there and it'll come right up. I stream every day, Monday through Friday. And on Saturdays at 6 p.m., we do our Socialism Saturday. I have a Substack where I break down the woke left ideology. I will break all this down to you in plain English and teach you how to see it in the real world. That is Karlyn, KARLYN.substack.com. And you can follow me on X at Dr. Karlyn B. And I know they're all different names, but it's just the way it worked out. So I do hope to welcome new people into the audience and listen, like, come with an open mind. I'm going to teach you things that other people aren't teaching you, because a lot of people have this wrong. They have the language thing wrong. And we really need to correct that, because we cannot defeat them until we understand them.
That's right. And by the way, I'll post the link to your Substack on all of these channels underneath the episode in the description so that people can find that. I'll post it on my X account as well. That, of course, is formerly known as Twitter. You can find me at Liz_Wheeler. I'll post that over there so you guys can find it. Karlyn, thank you for coming on the show. I know you have more of these videos still to come. Your investigations are ongoing, so we'll have you back soon. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, guys, make sure that you are subscribed to the show on Rumble, rumble.com/Liz Wheeler. Thank you for watching today. Thank you for listening. I'm Liz Wheeler. This is The Liz Wheeler Show. If you haven't already, give this video a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button below, and ring the bell to make sure you never miss a video.